Hello and welcome to the Edge Sports Week 7 review. I am your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst here at Edge Sports. Joining me as always is our VP of Data Science, Scott Brown. Scott, how did you enjoy the weekend of NFL action?
Yeah, I enjoyed it up until when the Bears game started. And that one was over probably about early first quarter or maybe late first quarter at best. But
I think it was, 21-0 right at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, it was brutal.
That's when Brady set the record, right?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, too, that the Bears actually beat Tampa Bay last year, with a similar roster, obviously different quarterback situation. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I seem to remember at the end of that game, Tom Brady having a senior moment and, not managing the timeouts and calling a time, thinking that he had a timeout left at the end of that last year.
Thinking it was about to be fourth down when it was just fourth down as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, so really amazing that, just about a year ago, the Bears were able to beat a team that pretty much looks the same. Obviously, Tampa Bay went on to win the Super Bowl, but
well, you know what it was? Is it was a last year was that Thursday night game. It was after 8 o'clock, and it's past Brady's bedtime, and he struggles in those late games. So
past his bedtime.
This year that he caught you before bedtime.
But yeah, for the Bears, it just looks brutal this season. I don't know, man. Give us the Lions or something because I don't know how else we're going to be able to pull out any game against a respectable team from here on out. Looks bad.
Fortunately, you get the Lions twice. I don't think y'all have played the Lions yet, have you?
I think
if you did, you beat them because they haven't won a game yet. So
the Bears beat the Lions a few weeks back. I guess it was week 4.
So you get them one more time.
Yep, thank goodness that we have that to look forward to. But kind of a bit of a less action week this week, I'd say. You definitely had. I think you could have maybe guessed this at the outset when you saw all the massive differences between the favorites and the underdogs in some of these games. But yeah, they definitely sort of won according to what you'd expect in many cases, where they're just massive blowouts. I mean, the New York Jets game and the New York Giants beating the Carolina Panthers. Yep. That game was never close, although a bit of a surprise there.
That is one that we had surprise there. We had the Giants -1 here as our spread versus -3 or -2 in the market. So.
That's right. Never miss an opportunity to give ourselves a little pat.
Always got to plug us.
Yeah. And then to be fair, there were a couple upsets as well, and we'll touch on those. But certainly Cincinnati over Baltimore, and then I think the main one was Tennessee over Kansas City. What a rough start to the season for Kansas City, and we say start, but we're already close. We're approaching the halfway mark, and man, they already have 4 losses. Yeah, quite a shock to see. But yeah, I think. I think it was a bit of a little bit of a down week this week, but we'll definitely go through here and hunt out kind of the interesting situations and go through them like we always do.
Yep, and before we jump right into that, just want to remind our audience, you guys can catch us on the Edge Sports Podcast Network. That is on your podcast platform of choice. We're available on all of them. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, help us grow our audience a little bit, and also subscribe to our Edge Sports YouTube channel as well. You'll be able to catch these podcasts as well as our matchup previews for every game of every week. And as always, be sure to check out the new site and experience we have at EdjSports.com. That's EdjSports.com. And don't forget to download our new app. It is available for both iOS and Android. You can get pregame betting insights for every game this season. You can check out our fair value spreads and totals. As I mentioned, if you would have had the app or gone to our site, you would have seen last week that we had the Giants as favorites there instead of Carolina like the market saw. You also would have seen Tennessee. We were a little bit higher on versus the spread and money line. They were just under 50%. They were down, I believe, in the 30s in the market. So get all that information on our app and on the website. You'll also have the ability to track any bets that you've placed with and see the probability of them hitting, and you'll see those probabilities update throughout the game. So, again, EdjSports.com and the Edge Sports app, EDJ Sports. So, as you mentioned, Scott, we kind of was a slow week. Like we were talking before we started here on the shows, like you kept sitting, watching, just waiting for something big to happen. Never really happened. Similar thing in the Lions-Rams game, which is the first one we'll start with. I know I did, just kept waiting for the Rams to pull away. Just knew it was going to happen. The Lions started hot. We had the QB battle, obviously the huge storyline of Goff versus Stafford. These guys were traded for each other in the offseason. Kind of a tumultuous parting there between Goff and the Rams as He apparently didn't hear from McVay or anyone in the Rams organization until they told him he was traded. McVay kind of showed some remorse for that and the way things happened. But this game, these two quarterbacks, both good quarterbacks. Goff kind of gets a bad rap. Maybe not one of the top tier, but a decent quarterback, NFL quarterback. Won some games out there with them. Detroit came in as huge underdogs. I think last I saw it closed around 16.5.
That's right.
Played competitive throughout the game. The Rams never really pulled away, but there were some big plays and coaching decisions of note in this game. Third quarter, 6:22 left, 4th and 1 on the LA Rams 18-yard line for the Lions. Dan Campbell kept his aggressive nature, which we'll talk about in a minute a little bit further, but chose to go for it rather than kick the field goal on 4th down. Win probability prior to the snap added was 5.9%. This was the 5th best go of the week this week. And then, do you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, just to interject a little bit. So this was something that we'll touch on maybe a little bit later, or actually we can do it right now. But props to Dan Campbell. I think this week really kind of thrown the entire kitchen sink out there on this drive that eventually ended by turnover on downs here. You may remember that they actually faked a punt on a 4th and 8. So really trying to pick up every edge that they could. And then, sort of like coming out blazing, I think, at the start of the game. They also faked a punt on their second drive of the game, which was preceded by a surprise onside kick recovery. So
they converted all those too, which is the craziest part.
All of them. And the fake punts, I think, netted them close to 50 yards, together. So seemingly everything going right for special teams for the Lions yesterday, but when you show up as 16.5-point dogs, you really need all of that to go right and then some, and they didn't get the then some. So unfortunately for them, a couple late game turnovers wound up dooming them, but certainly it's good to see for Dan Campbell to be pulling the trigger in all the ways he possibly can to give his team the best chance to win, and this 4th down play call was no exception.
Yeah, and you love to see that, especially Campbell. He's gotten kind of taken some flack. He's gotten a critique pretty hard this year about being too aggressive. But we love to see him continue that mindset, not really give in. You mentioned the couple fake punts, the onside kick. We said they converted all of those. The onside kick, I've got the numbers here, increased their win probability by 8.1%. The first fake punt, we actually agreed with the decision to go for it, but something we talk about here. It's typically better to keep the ball in the hands of your ball handlers. I guess that term's not really used in football as much as basketball, but those guys that have the ball most often. However, there is still something to the element of surprise. It's hard to really put a value on either of those things. But the first fake punt added 7.7% in win probability. And then the second fake punt, we actually disagreed with the decision to go for it. They were back on their own 35, I think. But again, and that was a 2.7% error we had. But you get into that, again, kind of that element of surprise. There's no way they're going to do it twice, especially on their own 35. But that conversion added 11%. So altogether, looking at, 27% win probability added on over the course of 3 plays. So he just kept his foot on the gas pedal like he has all year, but just came up, like you said, to get pretty much everything to go your way and to still lose by 9 points. It just shows how good that Rams team is and just how – I don't want to say how bad the Lions have been, because they've been in a lot of games with some good teams close until late. It's taken some field goals to kind of doom them a few times. But
right, and at this point, they're 0-7. Like, why not, right? Like, go for it. You have to play for something, and I think showing up every week, making it interesting, showing your team that you're going to fight for every game, that's the way to do it. I think that's the way to win the players over and establish yourself as a good decision maker in the NFL. So far, it's looking, at least from this focusing on this specific game, I think big props to Dan Campbell.
Yep. And so that was, we started off there. The 4th down go was the 5th best go of the week for the Lions. Later that quarter, the Rams had the ball. Third quarter, 4 minutes left, just over 4 minutes left. They had 4th and 1 at the Detroit 46, just across midfield. McVay chose to go for it and added 6.3% in pre-snap win probability. This was our best 4th down go of the week. Unfortunately for them as well, they did not convert. The Lions got the ball back. So close game there at that point too. I believe it was a 1-point game. Yeah, the Rams were up 1 at that point. So the Lions could have attempted a field goal to go ahead. We said Campbell knew it was going to take more than a field goal to go up by 2. McVay, the same thing. Instead of punting, he knows what he's got in his team. Chose to go for it. They failed. Paid off in the end. Both attempts failed, but the Rams ended up getting the win and coming up with some big plays later. And the final notable big play from this game was in the final seconds of the third quarter. Third quarter, 23 seconds left. 3rd and 12 at their own 22. So a long way to go. Not long way to go, just a long way to go, I guess. But Stafford hitting his man Cooper Kupp, who is just on an absolute tear to start the season. Could be in it for MVP. Derrick Henry's up there, running backs. Kupp could probably be the best receiver option for that right now. But I think it was a 59-yard catch and run, added 16.2% win probability, which was just our 5th most impactful play of the week. But it was a huge play in this game that led to the go-ahead and eventually ended up being the game-winning touchdown for the Rams. Anything else? So we've kind of hammered this game a lot. Next, we'll be getting into our top 5s. Is there any other game you wanted to cover? I know we talked about that Titans game, was just complete surprise. Not the fact that the Titans put up 27 points. We expected a lot of points in this game from both teams. But that other score, the other side, Kansas City, only 3 points.
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I don't think anybody would have seen that coming heading into this week. And, Tennessee, like you mentioned, can put up points with some of the best of them out there. They've already upset the Bills this season.
Just last week or 6 days ago.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry is, an absolute machine. But, man, yeah, Kansas City only putting up 3 points to fall to 3-4 so far this season. Same record as my beloved Chicago Bears. Just not something that we would have expected, to have witnessed at this point. Hopefully Patrick Mahomes can shake off the struggles, and obviously it looked like he might have gotten hurt at the end of that game, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, really hoping that we get the best of the Kansas City Chiefs the rest of the way, because they're obviously such a dynamic, fun team to watch, and there's a lot of up and comers this year in the NFL, so it would be great to see I hesitate to even call them the old guard, but yep. Certainly one of the teams that has been at the forefront of the NFL the last couple of seasons, with their Super Bowl victory 2 years ago, and then making the Super Bowl last year, and just falling short. We would love to see them at their best for those clashes, for those matchups. Hopefully, if they happen.
Yep.
In the postseason. So, but yeah, I think, we touched on it. I think this week's was kind of a slow one. So why don't we hop right into some of our top 5s?
Yep, and you mentioned, I just want to say quickly, this kind of the surprises are, the Raiders leading the AFC West. A lot of people thought, the Chargers would be up there if it wasn't the Chiefs. And the Chargers are in second. And then the Bengals leading the AFC North with that win over the Ravens. They're tied, but Cincinnati has the tiebreaker right now. So some surprises early. One thing, last thing I want to mention on the Chiefs there, we've got something that Aaron Schatz, our partner over at Football Outsiders, tweeted this morning. Kansas City Chiefs offensive DVOA in weeks 1 to 4 was first at 36.9%. From weeks 5 to 7, the last 3 weeks, 24th, wow. Minus 11.3%. So those are stats, again, you can get at footballoutsiders.com. With an Football Outsiders and FO Plus subscription, you can get access to more premium stats, more in-depth DVOA as well, for less than $5 a month over there at Football Outsiders. Now we'll move on. One thing I want to discuss before we get into the top 5, just something that we've noted here that I've kind of been keeping track of over the season are some fourth down aggressiveness. We had a request from a media member looking after week 1. There were a lot of goes and kind of saying, how does this compare to last year in different years? And we're 6 weeks that we've tracked so far, 7 weeks that we've tracked so far, and the aggressiveness seems to be up as far as the rate of goes relative to the opportunities. Week 1 was a pretty big. There have been a couple weeks that the spread was smaller, but it seems like every week, I think except for one, the go rate has been greater than it was in the corresponding week last week. Now, granted, different weeks can have different, like we saw this week, there really wasn't a ton out there. But I think over the course of the first 7 weeks, we are seeing more aggressiveness. And I think that's not a huge sample size, but still a fair enough sample size when you think to say, that, and we know from the eye test, the coaches are getting more aggressive. But I think that's fair to assume that there has been kind of a steady change over the last year or two even. Yeah,
I mean, like you said, definitely agrees with the eye test and sort of, from just watching the games and being someone who pays attention to these decisions, that they seem to be making more and more aggressive calls. And I think this has been a larger trend that has played out over multiple seasons. But so far this year, it really is being driven home that coaches have received the message in a lot of cases and are adjusting their behavior accordingly. I think as we continue to dive deeper and study this, I expect that's what we'll see borne out in the data, right? We do have to control for all the relevant game state factors in order to kind of weigh this evenly across time and across different seasons and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's likely what we are to see at the end of that. That coaches are really ramping up the aggression, and it's good to see. I have to say it's good to see. It makes for more interesting games. And
still some strides to be made, though, of course. But
yeah, we're not at the ceiling yet, no doubt. There's definitely room, still some room for improvement, and we'll I think touch on that here shortly.
Yeah, and as Michael Jordan would say, the roof is the ceiling, or the ceiling is the roof. I forget how he said it, but still got some ways to go. But some teams can really get up there if they start to take advantage of those fourth down situations. So now, before we get into the specific decisions, the best and worst, we'll start, as we always do, with our top 5 most impactful plays. So these are the plays that had the biggest impact on the game in terms of win probability from the offense's perspective, since they start with the ball either positive or negative. So we'll start with number 5. We covered this one at the top, the Rams and Lions. It was Rams down by 2, facing 3rd and long at their own 22-yard line right at the end of the third quarter. Matt Stafford hits Cooper Kupp for a gain of 59 yards all the way down to the Detroit 9. So just completely flipped the field, increased their win probability by 16.2%. Looking at number 4, we've got 49ers Colts from the Sunday night game. And this one was a washout. It was pouring. It seemed like sometimes it looked like it stopped and they'd go to a different camera angle and it was still coming down. So 49ers at this point, late in the third quarter, just under 5 minutes left, trailing by 1, 13-12. 3rd and 5 at their own 41. It didn't get better for the 49ers. Garoppolo stepped back to pass, was sacked, fumbled, recovered by Indianapolis. Good for a loss of 16.6% win probability for for San Francisco. I'm sorry. That was number 4. This is the only one we have in the impactful plays from this game. Was there anything that stood out to you from this game that you want to mention while we're on the impactful plays here with the 49ers and Colts? We haven't really talked about it yet. It was a pretty good game, though.
Yeah, it was a pretty good game. Obviously you mentioned the weather. I actually didn't catch much of this game. Was there anything that stood out to you from it, Ian?
The 49ers started off hot. The first drive, they looked great. Went out to a 7-0 lead. Couple of Colts turnovers early. Jonathan Taylor fumbled. Carson Wentz had a ball. Looked like he was kind of going to flip it. It slipped and barely went anywhere. Got intercepted. But just the way, to me, watching the 49ers, they looked so good, and then it just kind of all fell apart. And Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels mentioned something saying, how typically the first 15 plays of a game for a team are scripted and how they look so good. And then when it came to the rest of the game, it just they just couldn't get anything going on offense. So that was pretty surprising. But, the weather has an impact. And still the Colts played in the same weather, and they weathered those couple turnovers early, ended up, I think, maybe having one later. It might have been just those two, actually, and played pretty well. Jonathan Taylor did what he did. Both running backs actually had good games, but Carson Wentz coming up with the big play late. It's not in our impactful plays, but it was that third down at the end of the game. They were trying to run the clock out as best as they could. San Francisco still had a couple timeouts in the 2-minute warning. They passed on second down. Indianapolis was incomplete, kind of helped them out. But very next post, 3rd and 10 at the 28. Wentz goes deep to Michael Pittman for the touchdown and pretty much put it away at that point, put them up 12.
The game.
So love to see that aggressiveness, though. Like I said, they were trying to run the clock out. They ran it the first time. San Francisco still had one timeout in the 2-minute warning. There was about 3 minutes left on that second down and completion. And then to see him kind of be aggressive and go deep there, kind of makes me wonder what he was thinking on fourth down. He could attempt a long field goal. Looks like it would have been 46 yards in that range to go up 8. They were up 5 at that point.
Yeah.
Or if he was going to say, we're going to go for it on 4th and 10. Our defense has been good. So kind of interesting. Want to know what would have happened at that point. I can't imagine, even though it's Frank Reich, can't imagine he would have chosen to go for it. But you never know. But stayed aggressive. It paid off. They scored the touchdown to win. So overall, it wasn't the most exciting game. but it was a competitive game up until the end. So really nothing much more than that from that game.
Yeah, well, actually, we may touch on a Frank Reich decision a little bit later.
As far as big plays.
Yeah, but certainly Frank Reich has a pretty well-earned reputation for being aggressive in big moments, and that sounds like that was a good example of another one. But yeah, we'll get back to this one a little bit later.
Yep, and obviously that one won't show up on the top fives because it was a third down, but still a great decision there by him. So moving on to number 3 in the most impactful, the Falcons trailing the Dolphins by 1. Similar situation to the third down I just mentioned. This is 3rd and 2. They were trying to run out the clock basically to set up for a last-second field goal so that the Dolphins would not get a chance. A couple times I even saw Cordero Patterson, might have even been on this play, go down on purpose so he wouldn't score. It was 3rd and 2, Miami 16 with 1:45 left. Got 3 yards, just enough, went down, increased their win probability by 20.6%. Up to 93.8, ran the clock down for a Young Oeku game-winning field goal.
Yeah, huge conversion. You basically eliminate any reasonable chance your opponent sees the ball again, and you just have an absolute chip shot to win it. So,
and just another heartbreaking defeat for the Dolphins after last week, the losing on the game-winning field goal to Jacksonville in overtime to come back home. Tua played pretty well, had a couple interceptions. One of them was one of the worst decisions we've seen in a long time, the way he threw that ball, but to come out 4 touchdowns, I think had almost 300 yards passing, had a pretty good game with all the trade rumors swirling. Brian Flores said Tua is still their quarterback. Be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, another loss on a last-second field goal for the Dolphins, who are now, I think, 1-6, and things are not looking good for them there. But that was number 3, 20.6% win probability increase for the Falcons. Coming up to number 2, this was this was the play of the game, if not the play of the week in the entire NFL. The Bengals leading by 3 against the Ravens, another 3rd and 2 at their own 18. Looks like the Ravens can come up with a stop here and maybe get a chance to tie it up or take the lead. Joe Burrow hits his old college buddy, Jamar Chase. Completion, I think it was about 6 yards at the time, 5 yards, got the first down, and then just took off. Just broke a couple tackles and beat everyone, 82 yards for a touchdown. That one was a 24.3% increase.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jamar Chase setting the world on fire so far in his rookie season, and just took this one to the house. Absolutely, in a week sort of devoid of big swing plays, this is definitely one that qualifies as being up there, and it led the Bengals onto a huge victory over the Ravens in the division, and now they sit atop it, and in a week once again that was pretty muted. This was definitely, I think, one of the biggest games for sure.
And moving on to number 1, our most impactful play, coming back to the Dolphins and Falcons. I believe this was that interception I was just talking about. Dolphins down 20-14, 1st and 10 at the Atlanta 32, driving down to either to take the lead potentially or cut into that lead. A lot of time left in the fourth quarter. Tua's pass is intercepted at the Atlanta 30. And this one cost them 28.8%. They were near favorites to win at this point. They were at 46, so just under. They were approaching that 50-point mark or 50% mark and dropped down to 17.2. So this was a huge loss for them in that one.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you experience a turnover like this, when you're almost assured points based on where you are in terms of field position, it's gonna cost you dearly. This one, no different there, and there's still, I guess, silver lining here is there's still 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter, so they still had some time to recover. But yeah, that's not a good way to win games, to turn the ball over in those sorts of situations, no doubt.
So that'll do it for our most impactful plays. We're going to move on next to our top 5 best decisions, but just want to remind you again to check us out on any podcast platform. If you're already listening to us, you can subscribe to our podcast network here. And please review us, give us a 5-star review, and don't forget to subscribe to our EdjSports YouTube channel as well if you're not already here. So moving on to the top 5 best decisions now that we've gotten the impactful plays out of the way. These are the plays to remind everyone, or to let you know if you're new to our podcast. These are the pre-snap decisions. So the choice to go for it or to kick instead of going for it. To go for it instead of kicking for it. Most of the time, kicks are well-timed or good decisions because it's a 4th and long where that's the right choice and coaches know that. But these are the decisions that have the most impact, the best impact on win probability prior to the snap. So we'll start with number 5. Again, this is one we covered in the intro, the Lions and Rams. Lions trailing by 1, 4th and 1 at the Rams 18, instead of taking that field goal, that short field goal attempt for a 2-point lead with still a lot of time left in the game. Lions decide to go for it, increasing their pre-snap win probability by 3.9%. So after this play, they did not convert. They dropped from 31.8 to 41.3. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. So they dropped from 31.8%, but they lost 3.9% prior to the snap. And that's our number 5 of the week. So we kind of already discussed that one. So I'll move on to number 4. The Ravens down 10 to the Bengals, 4th and 1 at their own 29. Fourth quarter, 13:30 left. So this is a play that I was kind of talking about earlier when we were looking over these numbers. Is this one that we want to include? Because what we do is we take out plays where it's an obvious, a 4th down with 30 seconds left, you're down 5, you have to go for it. This is one I kind of wasn't sure at first. Is this one that is pretty obvious, but at the same time with almost a full quarter left? I can see a lot of coaches punting here from their own 29.
Certainly you wouldn't see 32 out of 32 NFL head coaches go for it here, which I think that sort of alludes to, harkens back to the comment we made earlier where there's still some room to go here in the NFL. I think it's worthy to give Harbaugh credit for this one. I think you're definitely going to see some coaches here sort of rely on the fact that there's still 13 and a half minutes left in this game. And just punt the ball away here and sort of hand wave away the fact that they're down 10, 4th and 1, you really have to start making stuff happen. And even though you're on your own 29-yard line, it's a slam dunk. And, Harbaugh, as he usually does, passes this test. And, they wind up going for it and pick up the first down, and off they go, right? And unfortunately, weren't able to turn the game, but certainly the decision making here was giving them the best chance to do so. So props to Harbaugh in this case.
Yep, and moving on to number 3, we've got the Giants against the Panthers. Joe Judge, a guy that we've kind of ragged on before for good reason, but this week he shows up on our best decisions of the week. Coming in at number 3, they were trailing 3-0. This is late in the first quarter, only about 42 seconds left. 4th and goal at the 1. This is kind of an obvious one. We still include it. But anytime, I think we mentioned it a couple weeks ago on this, or maybe even last week, 4th and goal on the 1. If you kick the field goal, the only time that's really acceptable is last second field goal when you have the win, or a lot of times coming down at the end of the second half when there's really no the other team's not going to have very much time left coming up on halftime. So this one was still a 5.1% increase because of the fact that you're going to convert this fairly often, not as often as out in the middle of the field. Everyone's packed in there on the goal line. Conversion or success rate is a little bit lower, I believe, here. But still a good decision and a 5.1% increase.
Yeah, and I think, just being real with your own team's chances, like the Giants are going to show up as the underdog in just about every game they play. Mm-hmm. And, even though it's early in the game, you got to make something happen here if you want to give your team the best chance to win it. And, when you're set up fourth and goal from the 1, it's a huge opportunity to make a splash in this game. Once again, we talk about this time and time again. Even if you are unsuccessful on the play, it's not all bad because you're backing up the other team. Oftentimes, they're going to have to play very conservatively offensively on the subsequent possession. You're likely to get the ball back with good field position. You can get safeties. There are all sorts of ways that this decision can work. And but in this one, they get the best possible outcome. Sorry. No, they didn't get the best possible outcome, but still makes it the right decision. And hopefully, I think we'd like to see Joe Judge continue to execute these play calls in these situations, and good on him for finding the right call on this one.
Yeah, and you mentioned safety. Immediately after this is Carolina had the ball 1st and 10 at their 2. Giants lost the ball, lost a yard on that 4th down. 3 plays later, they get a safety. So it worked out. That was one of those kind of best-case scenarios, aside from a turnover and a touchdown, getting a safety there, and you get the ball right back. So good decision, as you said, by Joe Judge to go for it there. We saw a very similar situation in the Green Bay game with Washington. Went for it. Could say, it was very close where Heineke had the touchdown, but his knee was down, the QB giving up. Anyway, Packers got the ball back, ended up having to punt from their end zone, and almost got blocked. So there's, you're at a better advantage there on defense with the team pinned pretty deep. So
right.
Moving on to number 2, as you alluded to, we've got Frank Reich here. 13-12. They're leading by 1 with 11:31 left in quarter number 3. Choose to go for it. 4th and 1 just across midfield. San Francisco 49-yard line. This was worth a 5.3% increase in pre-snap win probability. The Colts converted, fumbled, got lucky to recover. It would have been Jonathan Taylor's second lost fumble. His teammate came in, saved the day, recovered that ball. But just like you said, Frank Reich is known for this, and makes the right decision more often than not, I feel like.
Yeah, and this is has all the classic attributes of a good situation to go for it. Midfield, you're not going to be able to reverse field position that much in general. We have a 4th and 1 situation, so once again, your conversion rate is going to be at its peak. And yeah, we're dealing with a close game, so the Colts are only up 1. A lot of that basically leverages this decision to be very important. And the one thing is it's still early in the third quarter here, but oftentimes because we have all those other things working in the favor of going for it, it makes it a pretty hefty win probability change by going for it here. A hefty GWC change by going for it here. So yeah, Frank Reich finds the right call, and it's kind of no surprise seeing it come from him. He definitely has, I think, a pretty good track record in these moments.
And moving on to number 1, this is another one we talked about at the top with the Rams. Sean McVay choosing to go for it on 4th and 1 from the Detroit 46 with a 1-point lead. This was good for a 6.3% pre-snap win probability increase. Well, it would be good to see him. People say he's an innovator and aggressive, and we've come to find out that he's not all that aggressive. It would be nice to see him do this in other games where it's not. This game was close, but it's the Lions.
Yeah.
I wonder. I wouldn't venture to guess he would make the same decision in a game, against like the Cardinals a couple weeks ago. I don't remember what his decisions were, but if this was that situation, I would imagine he'd probably lean towards punting here and not giving Arizona a short field if you don't get it, which they did not get it here, and dropped them from 82.2% down to 70.1% after that play.
Yeah, McVay a little bit too inconsistent, I think. He's certainly not at the bottom of the league, but maybe not worthy of some of the accolades or the praise, we should say, of some of the coaches that are really, truly at the top. So yeah, I think he makes some good calls now and then, but once again, other times there are absolute head scratchers. Where he, I think, turtles up, goes a little bit too conservative when his he should be leaving the offense out in the field, but not in this case. So I think once again, good decision here, and we'll just have to keep an eye on him going forward and to see if he's able to maintain that any sort of consistency.
And that will do it for our top 5 best decisions of the week. Before we move on to the top 5 worst decisions, just want to remind you again to visit our site, EdjSports.com, or our app, EdjSports, available for both iOS and Android to get NFL news, our pregame betting analysis. You can also see all of these top 5s there every week and for every week in the past. So, Scott, now that we got those good decisions out of the way, we'll wrap up the weekend review with a look at the top 5 worst decisions. These are just the opposite of the best. These are decisions where a coach kicked instead of going for it when he should have on a 4th down. Sometimes we will have where a coach goes for it when he should have kicked, as we mentioned with the Chargers a couple weeks ago. That worked out for them, but was not the best decision prior to the play. So starting with number 5, we've got the Broncos and Browns. This was all the way back on Thursday night. Seems like forever ago. But the Broncos, after the Browns went up 7-0, just had a dominant opening drive. Dearness Johnson had an amazing game in his first career start at running back. Just a great story there. But Broncos down 7-0 with 10:25, just almost 5 minutes into this game. 4th and 1 at their own 34. Choose to punt. It's a loss of 2.4% win probability prior to the snap. Doesn't seem like a lot. Like I said, it was kind of not a lot of action this week. Our errors aren't really as big as other weeks, so some of these probably wouldn't show up in the top 5 other weeks, but nonetheless, this was number 5 worst of the week.
Yeah, 2.4% GWC change, not the end of the world, but if you're a team like the Broncos showing up as the underdog in this game, you find yourself down 7 already on your first possession. You gotta seek out the variance here, try to pick up every edge you possibly can. So when you face a 4th and 1 on your drive, go for it. Vic, you gotta go for it. Who knows if you get a spot this good at any point later on in the game, so you might as well make the most of it right here, right now. I don't care that it's just 10 minutes left in the first quarter. Like you really have to, if you're playing to win, the right thing to do is to go for it here. You can't, you can't sort of sit back and let the game come to you, because like you just have to be, I think, have an honest assessment of kind of where you stand, and you're definitely a big underdog here to the Browns. So I think I think this would have been a nice one to pick up. It wasn't the end of the world, but also certainly not a massive surprise to see them punt it here.
And moving on, we've got a tie at number 3. So this is the first one coming in at, I guess, number 4, but still tied for 3. Dolphins, Falcons. Brian Flores, the Miami Dolphins, facing 4th and 2 at their own 20. Late in the third quarter, just 1 second left. Chooses to punt, which cost him 2.6% win probability. Again, this is one, it's just a short yardage. Falcons were the worst team in DVOA coming into this. Again, you can get those DVOA stats at footballoutsiders.com, and you can have access to other premium DVOA statistics with an FO Plus subscription, which you can get for just under $5 a month. Again, that's at footballoutsiders.com. But Falcons worst in the league. I think they were worst on offense, like second or third worst on defense. Dolphins aren't much better, but I mean, against a bad defense, an NFL offense should be able to pick up 2 yards. Granted, even if you are on your own 20, there's still a lot of time, a whole quarter left in this game. If you don't get it, you can still hold them. If they score, if they score a touchdown, you go down 13 points. But your odds of picking that up are pretty good, especially against a bad defense.
Yeah, this one bears a lot of similarities to the previous decision we just talked about. I think, back to that comment made earlier about noticing the growing trend of aggressiveness on 4th down across the NFL. Here are the good examples of where there's still room to come up and really still edges to exploit for these coaches. And I think, hopefully we see that the next wave of aggressiveness is realized when these coaches are maybe in more uncomfortable spots, backed up in their own territory. Here, Miami was on their own 20, so traditionally a place where teams are going to punt the ball a lot. But yeah, when you're facing 4th and 2 here, you're down 6 points. You got to start making things happen, and this is definitely a spot where they could have been going for it, should have been going for it to give themselves the best chance to win.
Yep, and the next one that you mentioned, tied for 3, this is the Bengals, Zach Taylor. This is a guy, he makes an error, stealing a line there from Chris Collinsworth. This is a guy that, facing 4th and 1 in his own 34, doesn't go for it, but we've seen him go for it in games before in this similar situation. So this was just one early in the game, just chose not to go for it, tied against the Ravens, 11:54 left early in the second quarter. This cost him 2.6%. Again, this one is a little, I don't know if forgivable is the right word, but just knowing
marginal.
How he's made decisions this season, this is not a trend for him to punt on a 4th and 1 at that spot.
Yeah, and once again, these like you said this week, all of these are a bit marginal, but if you're trying to pick up that edge, I can totally make the case here that going for it's the right call. 4th and 1, you're denying the Ravens possession here. You're keeping the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands, and
that's one of those main teams you want to deny possession
as well. Absolutely. I mean, the Ravens are a formidable opponent both on offense and defense, but I think easy to support going forward here. Keep the ball, keep your offense on the field, and maximize points early in this game, even with just about 12 minutes left here in the second quarter. I think it's the right move. And so once again, I think we'd like to see coaches become more aggressive, even in these instances, maybe the less obvious situations.
Yeah, and one thing, you mentioned Lamar Jackson being awesome. You might, not want to give him a short field, but it's fair to note that the Bengals actually coming into this game had the number 5 defense on the year. Another Football Outsiders stat for you, just throwing them all at you today. Again, you can get them all at footballoutsiders.com. And then in the red zone, not as good. Or actually, sorry, looking at the wrong number here. The red zone, they are number 2 overall defense in the red zone defense. So, I was looking at offense. But still, you got a good defense. So even if you do turn the ball over there, it's not the end of the world. Looking here, their red zone defense is 13. So middle of the pack, so not terrible. So it's not necessarily a given that the Ravens are going to score there if they don't get that. So, again, not a little surprising to see that from Zach Taylor, but he's typically on the good side of these decisions this season. So not too worried about him moving forward. But moving on to number 2 is a guy, it's kind of a mixed bag with him. It's the Panthers' second-year coach, Matt Rule, down 5-3. We had a baseball score for a long portion of this game. Even got to 12-3, which is still can be a baseball score there. But facing 4th and 2 on his own 41, chose to punt. This was a 3% error, cost him 3% pre-snap win probability. And the reason this is surprising to me is on their opening possession, he had 4th and 1. I think it was his own 34. So very similar to what we just saw with Zach Taylor for the Bengals. And he went for it and ended up being a really good decision. It was on his own 36. And that was a 2.9% change, so just outside our top 5. And then here we are later. He's down by only 2. It's still pretty early in the game. It's early in the second half, about halfway through the third quarter, and chooses to punt. So kind of surprising there. Like I said, you never really know what you're going to get from him. It's interesting to watch each week what he does.
Yeah, it's definitely strange. I mean, I guess you could perhaps make the argument that there was some in-game stuff going on here that maybe changed his mind in going for it here. Who knows? Obviously, the Panthers struggled mightily yesterday on offense. But, I think ignoring all that, because we're not really privy to that information, this is sort of a head-scratcher, right? I mean, it's especially when you make sort of the complete opposite decision early in the game. You really wonder what's going on there, what's going through his head. But, yeah, just to recap, 4th and 2 from about midfield, the Carolina 41. I think this is a slam dunk to go for it in a close game. And, he decides for whatever reason to pass and punt the ball. Or, sorry, not to pass, but to pass on going for it and then punt the ball away to the Giants. So, definitely not one that we support. And, I like I said, really leaves you wondering what was going through his mind there on that decision.
Yeah, maybe he makes a different decision if he's got quarterback like, I don't know, Deshaun Watson on his team, which that team has been one of the names thrown around.
I see what you did there.
Aside from the Dolphins, although the Dolphins are the only team I think that they said Deshaun would accept a trade to, and he has a no-trade clause. But Panthers are going to be in on it, so we'll see. Maybe it had to do with the fact, I think even at that point, I don't know if that was still Sam Darnold in the game or not. Either way, they just were not looking good.
Right.
But moving on to number 1. And this, we had talked about this guy in our best decisions as one of the more analytically savvy head coaches. Frank Reich coming in 1-point lead. About 9 minutes left in the third quarter, a 4th and 4, so not super short, but at the San Francisco 40, chooses to go up to the line, pull the old hard count, try and get him off sides. Doesn't work. 4th and 4 from the 40. Chooses to punt. I think we liked the field goal even better. Granted, the weather was really bad in this one, and that's something someone asked on Twitter last night if we can account for that. And like we always kind of say, not directly. There's not a direct input, but you can probably explain the model is trained on play-by-play that encompasses all types of weather, including bad snowy games, rainy games, all that kind of stuff, bad wind. So we still in this situation would like them to go for it. I would think is even a stronger indication that they should go for it.
I think
at that point. And it was a 3.1% error, largest of the week. Again, not huge, but still, definitely should have gone for it there.
Yeah, it'll not be, I will not be sad if I never have to see another one of those, mail it in, we're going to go for it on 4th down, wink, wink, but we're going to do 5 back-to-back hard counts.
Some motion in there. At least you didn't waste a timeout. I think that's even worse.
Can we at least get a team that's going to, throw 4 hard counts out there, and then when the clock goes down to 1, they then snap the ball and catch everybody truly off guard for balance? But yeah, have yet to see it. Would love to see it though. That would be pretty funny. Definitely a head scratcher here from Coach Reich. He has such a solid reputation of going for it in these situations. You're on the San Francisco 40, right? And the weather is bad, so obviously I think you should appropriately discount the success rate of kicking a field goal here. But going for it is such the right, is definitely the right call in my mind. I don't really know what other factors maybe he was considering here, but in a close game here on Sunday night with, about midway through the third quarter, keep the offense on the field and go for it. I think it gives you the best chance to win. Once again, I think it's worth noting that even though we're kind of we're docking Coach Reich here, that the win probability loss was just 3.1%. So not the end of the world. This week was, as we mentioned at the forefront, very sort of muted in the swings, and this is, I think, good evidence of that. Some weeks we see some big whoppers as the worst fourth down play call, but this week was just a 3.1% error, and I think, unfortunately for Coach Reich, or I should say fortunately for the Colts and Coach Reich, they were able to pull it out. But definitely don't want to be getting in the habit of being at the top of this list. So hopefully he's able to reconsider this one and move forward and continue his, I think, living up to his high billing.
Yeah. Well, that will do it for all of our top fives. We're going to move into our Monday Night Football preview, but before we do that, just wanted to remind you all that our Risky Business column is out this week. We have this every week. Frank Frigo writes that for us. And this week he's looking at further analyzing Dan Campbell's outstanding play calling effort in the loss to the Rams. We kind of covered this a little bit earlier, threw out some of the numbers on the execution side of it. Well, Frank looks at Dan Campbell's decision-making in those pre-snap probabilities and just goes in depth on that. So you'll want to read that at EdjSports.com, and it's under the News and Analysis tab, and then you'll see Risky Business. And you'll also be able to see all of the top fives on our website, EdjSports.com, and on our app. Moving into Monday Night Football, we've got last game of the week. We finally get this Bye-Mageddon, as they're calling it, especially for fantasy football, over with some of the best teams and best players. And we've got the Saints and the Seahawks. So Saints are looking to keep pace with the Bucs in the South. The Seahawks are looking to make do without Russell Wilson. Geno Smith is making his first start at home for the Seahawks after starting that game in Pittsburgh last week, kind of bringing them back. Alex Collins brought them back last week. Geno Smith just kind of was there, made some plays, but the Saints are currently 4-point favorites in the market. Our edge fair value is 0. So basically we're at a pick 'em on this one. Now, we believe the Saints are the better team, but they're on the road. So, Scott, do you want to kind of explain to the audience what's kind of going into this and why we're seeing that big of a spread there compared to the market?
Yeah, sure. And, obviously having the matchup at Pick'em versus a 4-point differential there is actually quite big because we're, any number that swings from being on one side of 3 to the other is a pretty big move. And, as you mentioned, we see it in general, like everybody else, that New Orleans is the better team here. This is pretty obvious when you're without Russell Wilson on the other side. The difference is really, though, like how much better are they? And we think it's a lot more even than people would expect. Our model, has a pretty high opinion of Seattle. I think maybe independent of what the market thinks. And another important aspect in this game here is home field advantage. So New Orleans is on the road. Seattle, we don't have any sort of specific Seattle effect. It's thought that perhaps they have the most or the largest home field advantage in the NFL. Our model doesn't really have an opinion about that, but we definitely still have a pretty hefty effect in there for home field advantage. So I guess to the extent that you disagree with that, we might actually fall closer in line with the market.
Like 2 or 3 points you think there instead of the pick 'em?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We would maybe have, if we considered this game being like a neutral side game, we probably would have New Orleans closer. We would have New Orleans closer to being like a -2 or maybe -2.5, something like that. Our fair line for this game is -4. Excuse me, our fair for this game is pick'em, and the market is close to -4 on New Orleans. So we actually like Seattle's side in this game. We think that there's some edge to be had here. We also, in kind of shifting our perspective over to the total for this game, we like the over. So the market line here hovers about 42 points, and we think that a fair value for this betting contract would be actually 46. So our 2 picks for this game are Seattle taking the points and the over on the total line.
And even with Geno Smith starting last week, it took overtime, but the Pittsburgh game with the Seattle went over 42. They went 43. The week before that, when Geno Smith was in, I think for the second half, went over 42. They also hit 43 that week. So it looks all of their games have gone over 42. All of the Saints games have gone over 42, except for week 2 when they lost 26-7, and week 1 when they won 38-3. So recently these teams have both been putting up some points. So yeah, they'll definitely be interesting to see how that one turns out.
Yeah, and and then I think maybe just touching on the where the public money sits for this game, as a percentage of the total of number of bets, about 2/3 of bettors have placed are backing New Orleans, so they're taking New Orleans here, even in spite of being 4-point favorites, so against the spread. But in terms of the amount of money bet, overwhelmingly Seattle is favored here. So when we shift our focus over to dollars instead of number of bets, about 72% of the money is backing Seattle. So we definitely have an interesting setup here where the sort of the retail indicator is going against the sharp indicator, and seems to also confirm Edge's independent assessment of what the right side to bet this game is. So that's sort of an interesting takeaway. Not always the case, but at least in this Monday night game, it appears to be we appear to be on the same side as the sharps. So it's kind of an interesting thing to take a look to check out and take a look at on our site.
Yep, and mentioning the Sharps there, we do have a partnership with Sharp Rank as well, who they're an independent ranking system to basically help promote transparency to these people that claim to be Sharps. They have their 5-star consensus, which is kind of their top level of those. And this is a really good time to look at too, because we're day of the game. So all these Sharps have their picks in. They're 81% Seattle on their 5-star consensus. So again, just along with the market, and then the Sharps are included in that market data you were talking about, I imagine, but they're 4 out of 5 are on Seattle. So kind of maybe having that home field advantage and being higher on Seattle, we're not as crazy as you might think. So only time will tell. We're about 8.5 hours away from kickoff, so we will find out soon. That'll wrap up our Week 7 preview or review and our Monday Night Football preview. Just want to thank you all for listening and joining us again. Remember and remind you, we do have this show every Monday with Scott Brown and myself. You can find me on Thursdays with a betting preview for the weekend's games for Thursday Night Football and some of the weekend's games through Sunday. Those can all be found on the Edge Sports Podcast Network on any podcast platform, as well as our Edge Sports YouTube channel. Again, please give us a review, some 5-star reviews. We'd love them if you leave us a comment as well. We'll read it on the next show. And again, don't forget about our new site and our app experience at EdjSports.com and our new Edge Sports app available, again, for both iOS and Android. Scott, thank you for joining me. Enjoy the Monday Night Football game, and we'll talk next week.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Talk to you next week.